I wrote a little paperback book called Breaking Robert's Rules. I'm going to talk a little bit about it and see what questions it might raise for you. Generally, I was trying to aim at groups and organizations that currently make decisions by voting and the majority rules, the majority wins. This comes from a long tradition, basically under the heading of parliamentary procedure, with motions and seconding and everybody knowing that you're not done until there's a vote. And basically, in that context, people are jockeying, trying to find a way of wording their proposal that 51% of the group will support, too bad for the others. And in this little book, I try to present a way of thinking about the management of group decision-making that says, why don't we try at least to work out some kind of an agreement that almost everybody can accept? And so what I want to do is highlight a few of the key ideas in Breaking Robert's Rules and talk about how they could help groups and organizations of all kinds, business groups and small clubs and associations and large groups, how it can help all these groups make decisions in a way that more of their members will be happy with and not settle for a majority. My argument would be majority is not enough. Why don't you try to get a decision that meets everybody's interests? Does that make sense?
It does. I've certainly been involved in lots of groups where you're left in that situation at 51 versus 49. So I'm really anxious to hear. I am curious how you make sure that certain parties don't exploit this and drag the process on in the name of seeking consensus.
Yeah. And every time we say consensus or consensus building, some people roll their eyes and say it's going to take forever, or the kind of agreement you're going to get is going to be lowest common denominator, because that's the only way you could basically get everybody on board. I don't believe that. I believe that there are ways of putting together packages, ways of creating value that really help and allow groups to come closer to meeting all of the interests of all of the parties. But the only way to deal with the kind of problem you're describing is to have ground rules. So when I say a group should throw out Robert's rules, I mean with regard to how they make decisions. They might still have very clear ground rules about there's a time limit that are set on things, that by agreement, there's somebody still managing the meeting. That's still really important. I'm not really suggesting that suddenly, because people want to reach agreement independently, all by themselves, it'll work out and they'll reach unanimity. I don't think that's the case. So we have some ground rules. It's really important that someone lead the meeting with a commitment to trying to build consensus. And then the most important steps are, first, brainstorming with a commitment to hear what everybody's concerns are and not rushing too quickly to a motion that might get a majority, and then you just stop there because the majority's happy. Instead, you commit to brainstorming and trying to come up with something that everybody can live with. The end point in that kind of process is when the leader of the group says, well, we've been going on for some time with this brainstorming. We've tried to come to a package that meets everybody's interests as much as we can. And then the leader in this mode asks the key question: who can't live with this version of the package, of the proposal? And then one or two hands might go up if they've done a good job of problem solving. And then the leader might say to the one who's still left out, do you have a suggestion for how to augment this package, given all we've talked about, that'll make it better for you and no worse for anybody else? The person says, no, I can't think of that. The leader might say to the rest of the group, can anybody else think about, given their remaining unhappiness, what we could do to embellish the agreement? No. And then the leader would say, okay, I think we've come as close as we can to consensus, to overwhelming agreement. But it's not about voting in this alternative consensus building model. It's about brainstorming, problem solving, creating a package that's pretty good for everyone. And you can't do that if you really can't have a conversation. You need to suspend the formality of parliamentary procedure and Robert's rules that's very stilted. You're not allowed to talk until it's this person's done talking, until second of the motion. All those kinds of procedures get in the way of just problem solving. So you've got to have someone managing it. You've got to commit to trying to solve problems. It's a different aim in the group. It's an aim or an objective of everybody sharing responsibility in the group for trying to come up with something that meets the most important concerns of almost all the parties.
That's interesting. I have a couple questions. I guess one would be, who is this person? So you talked about having the leader or the facilitator at different points. What kind of a person are we looking for, and where do you find this person who's going to take on that role?
Yeah. Well, in public meetings now, we're used to a moderator under the terms of parliamentary procedure who just keeps order and then calls on people and says, okay, this is the motion, it's been seconded, now we'll vote. In the model I'm describing, you need, as you use the word, a facilitator, someone who the group selects, could be a member of the group, could be an outside person with skill as a facilitator, who has the ability to help a group engage in problem solving and keep working toward consensus. So it doesn't have to be the leader. It doesn't have to be the person who in the past ran the meeting. It could be a person, because of their skill and ability at managing problem solving, and because of the trust the group has in them to be fair and neutral, that could be the person who does this work.
Another question I had, I've been certainly part of different organizations where these rules, you mentioned the parliamentary procedure, they're really codified in the bylaws of the organization, and there's always somebody who's a real stickler for following Robert's rules. They pull out that big thick book whenever things get tense. How do you work around that?
Well, it turns out that in Robert's rules, there's a solution to the problem. Even under parliamentary procedure, there is a step allowed in which anybody can say, excuse me, point of order, anywhere in the timetable, has to be recognized by the chair. I'd like to propose we suspend the rules. And right at the beginning of a meeting, groups that are used to now to operating in a problem-solving mode, somebody stands up and says, I'd like to suspend the rules for the first part of this meeting. I'd like us to operate in a consensus mode. The moderator or the leader says, okay, we take a vote under Robert's rules. You need a vote. If 2/3 of the members say, yeah, let's suspend the rules, then you don't throw out your bylaws. You don't forever forbid the group from using what it's used to about Robert's rules, but you could substitute a different procedure for a period of time in the working of the group. And if they can reach a consensus, meaning if there's a proposal that everybody or almost everybody's happy to live with, then they adopt that, and then someone says, I move we go back to our usual rules, and then you can have the rest of the meeting. So I'm not arguing to forever throw out Robert's rules. I'm talking about learning how to suspend the rules, using the rules, so that there's a chance for groups to really try to work toward consensus rather than settling for a happy majority and an unhappy minority.
This makes a lot of sense to me. I look forward to putting it into practice myself.
So if I could just summarize, any group can use this, even if they have bylaws that prescribe Robert's rules. They just move to suspend the rules. They need to have a person who then takes over the management of the problem-solving part of their work. Everyone in the group has to accept some responsibility for coming up with ideas and proposals, not just good for them, but that are responsive to what everyone else is concerned about. They adopt a really informal process of discussion, not the formality that people are used to under Robert's rules. And they're seeking unanimity, but they're going to settle for overwhelming agreement in response to the question from the facilitator, which is, now, can everybody live with this? That's the reason for breaking Robert's rules, and that's what it feels like when you say that a majority is not enough.